A young billionaire is walking on the beach when he sees a little homeless girl pointing at a boat. When he approaches, he can't believe what he sees, and it changes his life forever. Ethan Morrison adjusted his jacket as he walked along the deserted beach. The watch on his wrist read 11:47 p.m. Far too late for someone like him to be wandering alone, when he would normally be poring over million-dollar contracts. The waves broke against the sand in a steady rhythm, like a natural melody that contrasted with the chaos in his mind. 3 days ago, he had closed the biggest deal of his career, the acquisition of a chain of stores that would yield millions for his company. He should be celebrating, not roaming an empty San Diego beach on a Tuesday night. But something was missing, an emptiness that not even the numbers in his bank account could fill. Ethan loosened his tie, feeling the salty wind against his face. His decisions over the past few years had taken him to the top, but at what cost? People had lost their jobs. Family businesses had shut down, and he had simply moved on, convincing himself that it was just business, nothing personal. He kicked a seashell, watching it disappear into the darkness. That was when he noticed a small silhouette sitting on the sand, about 50 yards away. In the faint moonlight, he saw it was a child, a little girl, alone. His first instinct was to turn around. Other people's problems weren't his specialty. He had enough trouble dealing with his own, but something made him stop. Maybe it was the way her small shoulders shook, or the fact that she was completely alone on a dark beach. "It's none of my business," he muttered to himself, but his feet were already carrying him toward her. The girl didn't notice him approaching. She was too focused on her silent crying, her eyes fixed on some distant point in the sea. Ethan stopped a few steps away, uncertain. Children had never been his strong suit. "Hey, are you all right?" he asked, his voice coming out softer than he intended. The girl turned with a start. She couldn't have been more than 9. Her face was streaked with tears, brown hair disheveled by the wind. She wore a faded coat far too big for her small frame, and her bare feet were covered in sand. For a moment, she just stared at him, like a frightened animal ready to bolt. Then something in her eyes changed. It wasn't fear, it was hope. "You need to see," she said urgently, pointing toward the water. Ethan followed the direction indicated by her small, dirty finger. About 30 yards from shore, an old fishing boat rocked with the waves. It seemed anchored, but even from a distance, it was clear it wasn't in good shape. "What's over there?" he asked, turning back to the girl. "Please," she insisted, getting to her feet. "He needs help." A chill ran down Ethan's spine, and not because of the cold wind. There was something about this situation that screamed trouble, the kind of trouble he avoided at all costs. Common sense told him to call the police and walk away, but at that moment, looking at that desperate child, Ethan felt something he hadn't experienced in years: compassion. "Who's out there?" he tried again. "My grandpa," she answered, her voice faltering. "He hasn't woken up since yesterday." Her words hit Ethan like a punch. The situation was more serious than he had imagined. "How did you get here?" he asked, trying to piece together what was going on. "I swam," she said simply. "I couldn't wake him up, so I came to find help." Ethan looked at the girl's wet clothes, at the cold March water, and at the distant boat. What this child had endured in the past few hours was beyond his comprehension. "What's your name?" he asked, as he took off his jacket to cover her shoulders. "Emily," she replied, clutching his shirt sleeve. "Now you're going to help, right?" Ethan looked again at the boat. He needed to call an ambulance or the Coast Guard, someone more qualified than him to handle this. But time was against them. "Stay here," he said, handing her his phone. "If I'm not back in 15 minutes, call 911. Without waiting for an answer, Ethan removed his shoes and his shirt, leaving only his undershirt and pants. The water was freezing as he waded in, stinging his skin like thousands of tiny needles. He swam with determination, fighting the current that tried to push him away. Each stroke brought him closer to the battered boat. Upon reaching the vessel, he grabbed onto the side and pulled himself up with difficulty. The wood was slippery, covered in moss and salt. The entire structure groaned under his weight when he finally managed to climb aboard. The inside of the boat smelled of mold and brine. The weak moonlight coming through the broken windows barely illuminated the space. Ethan advanced carefully, feeling the unstable floor beneath his feet. "Hello," he called. "Is anyone here?" No answer, only the constant sound of the waves hitting the hull and the creaking of old wood. That was when he saw him, a human shape huddled in a corner, covered by tattered blankets. Ethan approached quickly, kneeling next to the motionless figure. "Sir, can you hear me?" Gently, he moved the blanket away from the man's face. Then his heart stopped. Even in the dim light, even with the grey, unkempt beard covering much of his features, even with the deep lines time had etched into his skin, Ethan recognized him. It was Henry Dawson. Time had not been kind to him. His once strong face was gaunt, his closed eyes sunken into dark circles, his lips cracked from dehydration. But there was no doubt. It was Henry. The man who, 20 years earlier, had offered a job to a 17-year-old homeless and desperate Ethan. The man who had taught him about dignity and hard work. The man who believed in him when no one else cared. The man Ethan had abandoned without looking back when he got a better offer. A whirlwind of memories flooded his mind. Henry teaching him to fix boat engines, the simple lunches shared on the pier, the advice about honesty and integrity, the disappointment in the old man's eyes when Ethan announced he was leaving. "Henry," he whispered, guilt tightening around his chest like a vice. "What happened to you?" Ethan pressed 2 fingers against Henry's neck, feeling for a pulse. It was weak, but it was there. His breathing was shallow and ragged. He needed urgent medical attention. "I'm getting you out of here," he promised, even though Henry probably couldn't hear him. Carefully but resolutely, Ethan removed the blankets and slipped one arm under Henry's knees and the other around his shoulders. He lifted him, shocked by how light the man was, just skin and bones, where there once was muscle forged by years of hard labor. The trip back to the beach was even more difficult. Swimming while keeping Henry above water took all his strength and concentration. Every yard burned his muscles, but Ethan refused to stop. He couldn't fail. Not this time. When his feet finally touched the sand, Emily ran toward him. Her eyes widened at the sight of her unconscious grandfather in Ethan's arms. "Will he be okay?" she asked, her voice trembling with fear. "We're going to help him," Ethan replied, struggling to walk out of the water. "Did you call for an ambulance?" Emily shook her head. "I couldn't unlock it." Ethan wasted no time scolding her. He laid Henry carefully on the sand and grabbed his phone, quickly dialing 911. As he reported the situation to the dispatcher, he watched Emily hold her grandfather's hand, whispering words of encouragement. "They're on their way," he informed her after hanging up. "They'll be here in 5 minutes." Emily nodded, not taking her eyes off Henry. The silence between them was heavy with unasked questions, with a past Ethan had long buried. "He needs help," Emily finally said, looking at Ethan with eyes that seemed far older than her 9 years. "You can help, right?" The question hit him hard. It wasn't just about calling an ambulance or giving money to cover medical bills. It was about responsibility, about fixing past mistakes, about doing the right thing even when it's hard. Ethan swallowed. For the first time in years, he felt something other than indifference or ambition, a deep need to make a difference in someone's life. "Yes," he replied, his voice steady despite the lump in his throat. "I'll help." The flashing lights of the ambulance appeared in the distance, illuminating the night with red and blue. As the paramedics rushed over, Ethan made a decision. He wouldn't leave Henry or Emily alone again. Whatever the story behind their situation, he would be there to help make it right. When the medics lifted Henry onto the stretcher, Ethan picked up Emily. The little girl was exhausted, shivering from cold and fear. "Can I go with him?" she asked, her big brown eyes pleading. "We'll both go," Ethan assured her. At the hospital, while Henry was being treated, Ethan and Emily waited in the lobby. The girl had been given a blanket and hot chocolate by a nurse, but she still looked small and vulnerable in the oversized chair. "How did this happen, Emily?" Ethan asked gently. "How did you and your grandpa end up living on that boat?" Emily lowered her eyes to the cup in her hands. Her voice was calm when she began to speak, as though she were telling someone else's story. "We used to have a house, and a shop too. Grandpa fixed boats, like yours." She paused. "But then, the shop closed." Grandpa said it was because a big company bought everything in the area. After that, we lost our house. We tried staying with some people we knew, but no one could help us for very long. Each word was like a knife to Ethan's chest. Could it be that his own company was responsible for what happened to Henry? The irony was almost too cruel. "What about your parents?" he asked gently. "Mom died when I was little." "I never knew my dad." She looked at Ethan with an insight beyond her years. "It's always just been me and Grandpa." The doctor appeared in the hallway, interrupting their conversation. Ethan stood up immediately. "Mr. Dawson is stable," the doctor informed them. "Severe malnutrition, dehydration, and the onset of pneumonia. We're going to keep him hospitalized for a few days." "Will he be okay?" Emily asked. Gripping Ethan's hand with surprising strength, the doctor gave her a gentle smile. "Your grandpa is strong. With proper treatment, he should recover." The relief Ethan felt was overwhelming, but then came the question he'd been expecting. "Are you family?" the doctor asked, looking at the paperwork on his clipboard. Ethan hesitated. What was he to Henry, really? A former employee? An ungrateful person who left him? An old friend? "I'll cover the expenses." The doctor nodded, asking Ethan to follow him to fill out some forms. Before leaving, Ethan crouched in front of Emily. "I'm going to take care of this, and then we'll talk about where you'll stay, okay?" Emily bit her lip, uncertain. "I don't want to leave Grandpa alone." "I won't let that happen," he promised. "But you need to rest too." While filling out paperwork and providing his credit card, Ethan couldn't stop thinking about the fate that had brought them together again. Of all the beaches, on all the nights, he had found Henry just when he needed help the most. Some people would call it coincidence, others might call it destiny. Ethan wasn't sure what to call it, but he felt this was a second chance, an opportunity to do things right. When he returned to the waiting room, he found Emily asleep in the chair, the hospital blanket wrapped tightly around her. She looked even smaller in her sleep, her worries momentarily lifted from her young face. Ethan knew he couldn't leave her at the hospital, and a temporary shelter was out of the question. The girl had been through enough trauma. There was only one solution. When Emily woke, he had already made his decision. "Emily," he said softly, "your grandpa will be in the hospital for a few days. How about staying at my house until he's better?" The girl studied him with wary eyes. "I'm not going anywhere until I see Grandpa first." Ethan smiled. "Fair enough. We'll visit him and then decide, okay." When Emily finally saw Henry, connected to tubes and monitors but breathing quietly, she agreed to go with Ethan. On the way to his home, watching her in the rearview mirror trying to keep her eyes open, Ethan realized something inside him had changed. For the first time in many years, he wasn't thinking about business, acquisitions, or profits. He was thinking about how to help this small, devastated family, a family that, in some way, was connected to his own past. For the first time in years, Ethan Morrison felt he was doing something truly important. Ethan's car passed through the electronic gates, following the circular driveway until it stopped in front of his mansion. Emily, who had been silent throughout the drive from the hospital, widened her eyes at the imposing property. "You live here?" she asked, her small voice breaking the silence of the car. Ethan looked at his house through her eyes, a modern structure of glass and concrete, a perfectly manicured garden, large windows reflecting the late afternoon light. It looked like a movie set, totally disconnected from the reality of a child who had been sleeping in an abandoned boat. "Yes," he replied simply, opening the door. "Shall we go in?" Emily got out of the car slowly, her bare feet carefully stepping onto the stone path. The coat Ethan had loaned her swallowed her up completely. She seemed even smaller and more fragile against the backdrop of the imposing mansion. The front door opened automatically as they approached, making Emily jump back a little. "It's just a smart door," Ethan explained. "It recognizes when I get home." Inside, soft lights turned on automatically, revealing a minimalist space with elegant furniture, contemporary artwork, and large windows, everything in shades of white, grey, and black, clean, organized, and impersonal. "This is the entrance hall," Ethan said, suddenly aware that he had never guided a child through his house before. The living room is this way. Emily followed him in silence, keeping her arms crossed over her chest as if she were afraid to touch anything. Her eyes roamed every detail of the house, but she seemed to maintain a cautious distance from it all. In the large living room, Ethan gestured to the big white sofa. "You can sit." Emily looked at her dirty clothes, then at the pristine sofa. "I'm too dirty," she muttered. Ethan felt a pang of embarrassment. In his world of expensive objects and perfectly clean spaces, he had never considered how it might make someone feel inadequate. "Don't worry about that," he said, trying to sound casual. "It's just a sofa, it can be cleaned." Even so, Emily remained standing, her eyes now fixed on a small painting on the wall, the only piece that stood out from the modern decor. It was a simple painting of a fishing boat against a sunset, signed by an unknown artist. "Do you like it?" Ethan asked, noticing her interest. She nodded. "It looks like the boat we lived in, only nicer." The observation hit Ethan harder than he expected. The painting he had bought at a gallery, just because it matched the decor, meant something completely different to Emily. "You must be hungry," he said, changing the subject. "Let's see what we have in the kitchen." The kitchen was another monument to contemporary design: marble countertops, stainless steel appliances, handleless cabinets. Ethan opened the fridge, finding it predictably empty except for a few bottles of water, an expensive bottle of wine, and some basic items. "Looks like we'll have to order something," he said. "What do you like to eat?" Emily shrugged. "Anything is fine." "Pizza," he suggested. A small smile appeared on her face. "It's been a long time since I had pizza." While waiting for delivery, Ethan realized he needed to figure out a bath and clothes situation. "I think you'd like to take a bath," he suggested. "I'll show you where the bathroom is," Emily agreed shyly, following him to one of the 4 bathrooms in the house. Ethan opened the door, revealing another white marble environment, complete with a whirlpool tub and separate shower. "The towels are in that cabinet," he explained, pointing to a built-in door. "There are new soap and shampoo under the sink. I'll bring you a t-shirt to use as pajamas for tonight. Tomorrow we'll buy new clothes." When he returned with the folded t-shirt, he found Emily still standing in the center of the bathroom, looking lost at the digital shower controls. How do you turn this on?" she asked, embarrassed. Ethan realized his mistake. His ultra-modern bathroom would be completely foreign to someone used to much simpler conditions. "Let me show you," he said, stepping into the bathroom and adjusting the digital controls. "Just tap here to turn it on, and these buttons to set the temperature." Emily nodded, taking in the instructions with focused attention. While Emily bathed, Ethan used the time to send some urgent emails. First to his assistant, canceling his commitments for the next 2 days, then to his lawyer, requesting information about Emily's legal situation and how to proceed with helping Henry. When Emily returned to the kitchen, the pizza had already arrived. She wore Ethan's white t-shirt like a dress, and her wet hair fell in dark curls over her shoulders. Her face, now clean, revealed freckles he hadn't noticed before. "You can sit," Ethan invited, pointing to one of the high stools around the kitchen island. Emily climbed up with some difficulty, her bare feet dangling above the floor. Ethan opened the pizza box, releasing the aroma of melted cheese and tomato sauce. "Help yourself," he said, taking a slice for himself. Emily hesitated for a moment before picking up a small slice. She ate slowly, savoring each bite as though it was something precious. "So, Emily," Ethan began, trying to fill the silence, "how old are you?" 9, she answered between bites. "I'll be 10 in July. Did you go to school before?" A shadow passed over her face. "Before we lost our house, yeah. I finished the 3rd grade. After that, Grandpa tried to teach me at home, but..." She trailed off. Ethan nodded, doing the math in his head. "At least a year with no formal education. Did you like school?" Emily's face brightened a bit. "I liked reading and art. The teacher said I was good at drawing." That information sparked a distant memory in Ethan. He also liked to read and draw as a child. He had sketchbooks filled with drawings of boats and marine scenes. That was how Henry first noticed him, sketching on the dock while waiting for odd jobs. "I liked to draw too when I was your age," he said, surprised at himself for sharing something so personal. Really? Emily seemed genuinely interested. Do you still draw? No, he admitted. I haven't done that in a long time. Why not? The simple question caught him off guard. When exactly had he given up something he loved? There was no specific moment, just a gradual shift toward more productive activities. I guess I got busy with other things, he answered vaguely. Mainly work. Emily nodded, as if she understood completely. Grandpa used to draw too. He made boat designs, but he stopped when we lost our home. After the meal, Ethan showed Emily the guest room. It was spacious and as minimalist as the rest of the house, with a king-size bed that looked enormous for someone her size. If you need anything during the night, my room is at the end of the hall, he informed her. There's a bathroom there, he added, pointing to an adjacent door. Emily nodded, looking too small for that huge bed. Good night, Emily, Ethan said, heading for the door. Can I see my grandpa tomorrow? She asked, her voice revealing the worry she tried to hide. Of course, he promised. We'll go to the hospital first thing in the morning. You promise? The word made Ethan pause. Promises hadn't been part of his vocabulary for years. I promise, he said, surprised at how firm his own voice sounded. In his own room, Ethan couldn't sleep as usual. He lay in the dark, replaying the day's events. In less than 24 hours, his orderly and predictable life had taken a sudden turn. From a solitary executive to the temporary guardian of a child, with the added responsibility for a man who once meant so much to him. The soft sound of a door opening interrupted his thoughts. He got up and opened his bedroom door, finding Emily standing in the dark hallway, looking startled at being discovered. Everything okay? He asked, keeping his voice low. Sorry, she mumbled. I just couldn't sleep. The room is so big. Ethan understood immediately. After living in confined spaces, a large room might feel too exposed, unprotected. Want a glass of water? Or maybe warm milk? Emily shook her head. I just wanted to know if you were still here. Her simple confession caught him off guard. Of course, she was insecure. Her only relative was in the hospital, and she was in a stranger's home. I'm here, he assured her. I'm not going anywhere. Can I leave my bedroom door open? Sure. Do you want me to leave a light on in the hallway too? She nodded, looking relieved. Ethan adjusted one of the lights to the lowest setting, creating a soft glow. Is that better? Yes, she smiled slightly. Thank you. The next morning, Ethan woke up earlier than usual. He checked on Emily, still asleep, small under the white sheets, and decided not to wake her yet. In the kitchen, he faced another challenge, what to serve for a child's breakfast. He ended up ordering a variety of items from a nearby bakery. While waiting for the delivery, he made some necessary phone calls. First, to the hospital, where they confirmed that Henry had spent a stable night. Then to his personal assistant, briefly explaining the situation and asking her to arrange essential shopping for a 9-year-old girl. Finally, he made the hardest call, to his CFO, needing to see if his company had any connection to Henry's business closing. Jake, I need you to check our records, he said quietly. Look for acquisitions around the pier area, specifically any related to a naval repair shop. Owner's name, Henry Dawson. Is something wrong, Ethan? Jake asked, clearly surprised. Just looking into something from the past, Ethan answered vaguely. It's urgent. Emily appeared in the kitchen doorway as he hung up, still wearing the oversized t-shirt as pajamas, her hair ruffled from sleep. Good morning, Ethan said, forcing a smile. Sleep well. She nodded, rubbing her eyes. Are we going to see my grandpa today? Yes, as I promised. Breakfast is on the way, and then we'll head to the hospital. During breakfast, Ethan explained to Emily the plan for the day. First, they'd visit Henry. After that, they'd stop by some shops to buy clothes and other essentials. You don't have to buy me anything, Emily protested. You're already doing too much. You need clean clothes, Ethan insisted gently. Hand some other things while your grandpa recovers. Emily lowered her eyes to her plate. How long will he stay in the hospital? Probably a few days, Ethan answered, trying to balance honesty with optimism. They need to make sure he's fully recovered. And then where do we go? The question lingered between them, heavy with uncertainty. It was the question Ethan had been avoiding since the night before. We'll figure that out, he promised, with more confidence than he felt. For now, you can stay with me. Emily's eyes widened. Really, you won't mind? It's no trouble at all. He realized he meant it. This house is too big for just one person anyway. At the hospital, they found Henry awake, looking marginally better. Emily ran to his bed, hugging him carefully to avoid the tubes and wires. Henry placed a weak hand on her head, murmuring comforting words. Ethan stayed back, feeling like an intruder. When Henry finally looked beyond his granddaughter and saw him, his eyes widened in recognition. "Ethan Morrison," he said, his voice hoarse but steady. "Never thought I'd see you again." There was no anger in his tone, just a statement of fact. "Hello, Henry," Ethan replied, stepping closer hesitantly. "I wish it were under better circumstances." "Emily told me you helped us," Henry said. "Thank you for that." "You don't need to thank me," Ethan said quickly. "Anyone would have done the same." Henry gave a small, tired smile. "We both know that's not true." "Emily is staying with me while you recover," Ethan explained, changing the subject. "My house has more than enough space." "Ethan lives in a huge house, Grandpa," Emily chimed in, excited. "And he said we can stay there when you leave the hospital too." Henry narrowed his eyes slightly. "That's very generous, but we don't need charity." "It's not charity, Henry," Ethan said, choosing his words carefully. "It's the least I can do for someone who once did so much for me." A meaningful silence fell between them. Henry suggested Emily go buy a hot chocolate in the cafeteria, handing her a few coins he had stashed away. When they were alone, Henry adjusted himself in bed with some effort. "So, what really brings you back after all these years?" "It was coincidence," Ethan replied honestly. "I was walking on the beach when I found Emily. She led me to you." "Coincidence," Henry repeated, almost ironically. "Or maybe fate has a sense of humor." "Henry, what happened? How did you end up living on that boat?" Henry's face hardened almost imperceptibly. "Life happened. Businesses closed, opportunities dried up. When you're nearly 70 and raising a granddaughter, your options become limited. But your shop at the pier, it was doing well when I left." "It was," Henry agreed, "until a big developer bought out the entire area to build a new tourist complex. The compensation barely covered my debts. Without the shop, I couldn't keep the house." Ethan felt his heart race. That description matched exactly the kind of acquisition his company carried out regularly. "When did this happen?" he asked, dreading the answer. "About 3 years ago," Henry replied. 3 years ago, precisely when his company had started the Harbor View Resort project in that pier area. "Henry," Ethan began, feeling his throat go dry, "I want to help. Really help. Not just with medical bills or a temporary place to stay. I want to help you rebuild." "Why?" The question was direct. "What do you get out of it?" "Because you helped me when I needed it," Ethan finally responded. "And because it's the right thing to do." Henry didn't answer immediately, his eyes studying Ethan intently. "Emily likes you. She has good instincts about people." Their conversation was interrupted when Emily returned, carrying a cup of hot chocolate in both hands. Her smile at seeing that Henry and Ethan seemed to be talking amicably lit up her tired face. In the days that followed, a routine took shape. In the morning, Ethan worked in his home office, responding to emails and making video calls, while Emily read or drew in the living room. In the afternoon, they visited Henry at the hospital. Ethan received the confirmation he feared. His company, Coastal Developments, had been responsible for the acquisition that resulted in Henry's shop shutting down. The compensation had met legal requirements, but was clearly insufficient for someone to start over, especially with a child to raise. The guilt he had felt earlier intensified, becoming an urgent need to make amends. It wasn't just about providing temporary assistance, it was about taking responsibility, even indirectly, for the damage caused. One afternoon, while leaving the hospital, Ethan suggested they stop by a bookstore. Emily's eyes lit up as they entered the large store. "Can I really pick one?" she asked, her small voice full of wonder. "You can pick several," Ethan replied. "As many as you want," While Emily explored the children's section with growing excitement, Ethan watched, impressed by how she seemed to momentarily forget her worries. He had once felt that same passion, discovering new worlds through reading. Without thinking too much, he walked to the art section and grabbed a sketchbook and a set of quality-colored pencils. Emily returned, hugging 3 books to her chest, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "I like this one," she said, showing one of the books. "The girl in the story reminds me of me." Ethan smiled. "Great choices. And look, I got this for you too." He showed her the sketchbook and pencils. "For when you want to draw," he explained, "and maybe we can draw together someday. You can show me how it's done." The smile that lit up her face warmed something inside Ethan. "Really? You'll draw with me?" "I'll try," he promised. As the days went by, Ethan noticed a subtle change taking place. His house, once an impersonal space, began to show signs of life. Emily's drawings on the fridge, children's books on the coffee table, small touches that turned the cold mansion into something more welcoming. More importantly, something was changing within him. Watching Emily draw with total focus, or seeing Henry's dignity as he recovered, Ethan began to question the void his successful life had become. One night, after Emily went to sleep, Ethan sat on the balcony looking out at the ocean. In his hands was a drawing Emily had made. 3 figures holding hands in front of a house with a boat in the background. "It's us," she had explained when she handed him the picture. "Me, you and Grandpa." Looking at that simple image, Ethan felt a certainty growing inside him. It wouldn't be just temporary help. It would be a real commitment. Slowly, he picked up a pencil and began sketching lines on the blank paper beside him. It wasn't anything elaborate, just a boat against the horizon. But each stroke seemed to reconnect a part of himself that had been dormant for too long. As he drew under the soft balcony light, Ethan realized it wasn't just Henry and Emily who were finding a temporary home. Maybe he was too, finding something he hadn't known he'd lost. The hospital room had a different glow in the morning. Sunlight shone through half-open blinds, creating linear patterns on the white floor. It was Henry's 5th day in the hospital, and the signs of improvement were clear. His color was returning, and the doctors were talking about releasing him in the next few days. Ethan stood at the door, watching the older man before making his presence known. Henry was sitting in bed, looking out the window. There was a quietness about him, a distance that went beyond the physical space of the room, as if part of him was still on that abandoned boat, reluctant to leave it behind. "Good morning, Henry," Ethan finally said, entering the room with a newspaper under his arm. "I brought the paper you asked for yesterday." Henry turned slowly and nodded. "Thank you. Emily didn't come with you today. She's at the reception, chatting with that nurse she likes, the one who has a son her age." Henry nodded again, taking the newspaper Ethan handed him. His movements were cautious, still restricted by weakness, but there was determination in them. "The doctors say you might be discharged tomorrow," Ethan commented, sitting in the chair beside the bed. "Yes, I spoke with Dr. Rivera this morning. She seems pleased with the test results." Their conversation flowed, polite and reserved, avoiding any depth. Over the past few days, Ethan had visited the hospital twice a day, always bringing something Henry might need: books, newspapers, a small radio, little gestures meant to fill the chasm that had formed between them over the years. "How is Emily adapting to your home?" Henry asked, folding the newspaper without opening it. "Surprisingly well, all things considered. She's resilient." A brief smile crossed Henry's tired face. "She always has been. Even in the worst situations, she finds a reason to smile." There was a pause before he added, "You didn't have to do all this, you know. Taking Emily into your house, paying for this private room." "I wanted to," Ethan interrupted. "It's no trouble." Henry studied him for a moment. "It's not about whether it's trouble or not, Ethan. It's about duty. You think you owe me something." The frankness caught Ethan off guard. It was true, of course. Ever since learning that his company had caused Henry's shop to close, guilt had been gnawing at him. But there was more to it, something he couldn't fully articulate yet. "It's complicated," he finally admitted. "Things usually are," Henry replied, turning his gaze to the window again. I've lived long enough to know our motives are rarely pure. A silence settled between them, heavy with everything unspoken. Ethan watched Henry's hands, still strong despite everything, bearing the same calluses he remembered from so many years before. Hands that had built and repaired, that had supported a family, that now rested restless on the white hospital blanket. "When you're discharged," Ethan began hesitantly, "my offer still stands. My house has more than enough space for you and Emily." Henry didn't answer right away. His eyes stayed on the scene beyond the window, the blue sky, the palm trees swaying in the soft breeze, a world that seemed so close yet unreachable from his hospital bed. "I appreciate the offer," he said finally, "but we need to find our own way. Henry, please be reasonable. You're still recovering. Emily needs stability. And you think you can give us that?" Henry interrupted calmly but firmly. "Stability isn't just a roof and food on the table, Ethan. It's knowing who you are and where you fit in the world." His words hit Ethan like a physical blow. It wasn't just a refusal of his offer. It was a deeper challenge to his motivations. "I just want to help," he said, hating how hollow the phrase sounded even to his own ears. "I know," Henry softened his tone, "and I'm grateful for that. But there are different ways to help someone, Ethan. Not all of them involve money or big houses." Before Ethan could respond, Emily walked in carrying a small potted plant she must have bought at the hospital gift shop. "Grandpa, look what I got. Nurse Jamie said plants help people feel better." Henry smiled, the first genuine smile Ethan had seen since finding him. "It's lovely, sweetheart. Let's put it by the window so it gets some sun." While Emily carefully arranged the plant on the windowsill, explaining excitedly how it needed to be watered, Ethan observed the interaction between grandfather and granddaughter. There was a simplicity there, a connection that went beyond the hardships they'd faced. Despite everything they'd lost, they had something that Ethan, with all his wealth and success, did not. That realization stayed with him for the rest of the day, even after they left the hospital and returned home. While Emily occupied herself with a new book in the living room, Ethan locked himself in his office for an afternoon of video conferences and urgent emails. The virtual meeting room for coastal developments appeared on his computer screen. Familiar faces in small digital windows, executives in impeccable suits, serious expressions, all waiting for his decisions. This was the world he knew so well, where he'd moved with confidence for years. "We have a decision to make regarding the acquisition in Newport Beach," began Jaker, his CFO. "The owners are resisting, but our lawyers believe we can apply some pressure through zoning contracts." Ethan listened as they detailed the case. A small, family-owned marina, profitable but not extraordinarily successful, occupying a valuable area coastal developments wanted for its next luxury venture. The proposed strategy was familiar. Initial offers below fair value, followed by legal maneuvers that would make the current business operation difficult until the owners had no choice but to sell at the company's price. It was a tactic they had used dozens of times before, the same tactic likely used against Henry. "Ethan, do you agree with this approach?" Jake's voice brought him back to reality. Ethan looked at the expectant faces on his screen. Everyone waited for his approval, as they always did. His role as CEO was to give the green light for coastal development's well-oiled machine to move forward. "How long has that marina been operating?" he asked instead of answering. There was a moment of confused silence before someone checked some notes. "It's been in the same family for 3 generations, approximately 67 years. 3 generations. Almost 7 decades of a family's history, about to be erased by a decision made in a virtual meeting room. Who are the current owners?" Ethan continued, more note-checking. "A couple, Car, Richard and Susan Lambert. In their 60s, they have 2 children who work in the business." Ethan closed his eyes for a moment. It could have been Henry and his family in a slightly different universe. "No," he said finally, to everyone's evident surprise. "No, and we won't proceed, or you disagree with the strategy?" Jake asked, confused. "Both," Ethan replied. "I want us to re-evaluate this project. There are other plots available in the area that won't involve displacing established businesses." He could sense his team's confusion through the screen. In 10 years as CEO, he had never questioned the company's aggressive approach to property acquisition. "Ethan, with all due respect, This location is ideal. The feasibility studies are done, and the investors are counting on this specific project, argued Sandra, his director of development. I'm aware, he answered firmly, but I want to explore alternatives. Schedule an in-person meeting for tomorrow. We'll discuss it in detail. He ended the call before they could protest further. His phone began ringing immediately, likely Jake or another executive wanting to understand what had just happened. Ethan ignored it, swiveling his chair to look out the panoramic window of his office. Outside, the late afternoon sun bathed the ocean in gold. The same ocean that had taken away Henry's livelihood, that had become his temporary home. The view Ethan once considered a symbol of his success now felt laden with irony. His cell phone vibrated with a message. It was from Emily. I finished my book. Can I pick another from your shelf? The simplicity of her question made him smile. Of course, he replied. Take as many as you want. He got up and left the office, finding Emily already browsing his little used bookshelf in the living room. She had set aside a few volumes and was examining them carefully. You have a lot of books about boats, she observed when she saw him. Yes, Ethan replied, surprised by her observation. He'd never noticed that pattern in his collection. I guess I've always had a fascination with the sea, Emily nodded, as though that made perfect sense. Grandpa says the ocean is in our blood. Once you connect with it, you can never really stay away for long. Ethan thought of the ocean view from his office, the house he'd bought specifically for its proximity to the coast. Even in his years most removed from everything Henry had taught him, he had never managed to stray too far from the sea. Your grandpa is a wise man, he said. Do you think he's going to be okay? Emily asked, her voice suddenly small. Ethan sat next to her on the sofa. Yes, I believe he will. The doctors are optimistic, and he seems stronger every day. I'm not just talking about his health, Emily clarified, her serious eyes locked on Ethan's. I'm talking about everything. Having a place to live, being happy again. The question caught him off guard. It was easy to forget, looking at this child, just how much she had already faced and how much she understood about life's hardships. I'll do my best to help make that happen, he promised. Emily studied his face for a moment, as if gauging the sincerity of his words. He's stubborn, you know. Grandpa won't accept help easily. I'm starting to see that, Ethan smiled. It's because he was always the one helping others. It's hard for him to be the one who needs help now. The perceptiveness of her observation surprised Ethan. You're very observant for someone your age. Emily shrugged. When you don't have much, you pay more attention to people. That's what Grandpa always says. That simple phrase stayed with Ethan for the rest of the day, following him back to the hospital that evening. He found Henry sitting in a chair beside his bed, looking more robust than in the morning, flipping through the newspaper Ethan had brought him. Emily ran to hug him, excitedly telling him about the new book she'd discovered. Ethan stood back, thinking about what Emily had said. When was the last time he truly paid attention to the people around him? Not as resources or obstacles in negotiations, but as complete human beings with stories, struggles, and dreams. After Emily left to get some hot chocolate, her new ritual during hospital visits, Ethan sat next to Henry. You raised her well, he said. Emily, she has a wisdom you wouldn't expect from someone her age. Henry folded the newspaper, a small smile on his lips. I can't take all the credit. She was always like that, observant and attentive. Sometimes I think she teaches me more than I teach her. Still, it can't have been easy, raising a child alone, especially under these circumstances. It wasn't, Henry admitted. But when you love someone, you do what needs to be done. No questions asked, no hesitation. The simplicity of that statement carried a truth Ethan had lost somewhere along the way. In his pursuit of success and wealth, he had forgotten what it meant to do something just because it was right, because love demanded it. Henry, he began, unsure of how to proceed. I know you don't want to accept my help, and I respect that. But you should know I really want to do right by you this time, not just out of guilt or duty, but because, he hesitated, searching for the right words, because maybe I need it as much as you do. Henry studied him in silence, his tired but perceptive eyes. What happened to you, Ethan? The young man I knew had fire in his eyes. dreams bigger than he was. Now I see a successful man, sure, but missing something. It was the very question Ethan had been asking himself since he found Emily on the beach. What had happened to him over the years? When had success become more important than humanity? When had the idealistic youth turned into the ruthless businessman who didn't think twice about destroying families like Henry's? "I think I got lost somewhere along the way," he finally admitted, "and I'm not sure if I can find my way back alone." It was the most honest confession he'd made in years. Maybe the first time he admitted, even to himself, that all his outward success masked a growing emptiness. Henry didn't reply immediately. His gaze shifted to the small plant Emily had brought earlier, now catching the last rays of the setting sun on the windowsill. "It's never too late to change course, Ethan," he said at last. "The question is, are you truly willing to do it?" The question lingered between them, challenging and with no easy answer. Before Ethan could reply, Emily returned with hot chocolate for everyone, her smile brightening the room. As they drank together, talking about simple things, Emily's new book, the bird that had perched on the windowsill earlier, dinner plans, Ethan felt something shift inside him, a growing certainty that he was at a crossroads in his life, and for the first time in a long while, he wasn't sure which path to take. The sky gradually darkened beyond the large windows of the living room. Ethan had turned on only the floor lamp in the corner, creating a cozy atmosphere that contrasted with the usual formality of the house. Henry was asleep in the guest room, exhausted after his first full day out of the hospital. Emily was curled up on the sofa, her legs tucked beneath her, holding a cup of tea with both hands as though to soak up all its warmth. Steam rose in delicate spirals, briefly blurring her face. There was a quietness about her tonight, different from her usual energy. Ethan sat in the nearby armchair, respecting the silence. In the 2 weeks since they'd met, he'd learned that Emily, like her grandpa, needed space for her reflections. "You want to know how we ended up on that boat, don't you?" she asked suddenly, her eyes meeting his. The question caught him off guard. "Only if you want to tell me." Emily took a small sip of tea as if gathering courage. "I never knew my dad," she began, her voice small but firm. "My mum died when I was still very little. I don't remember much about her, just her voice singing when I was scared of the dark. After she was gone, Grandpa was all I had. He's the only person who looked after me." Ethan stayed silent, realizing this was a rare moment of trust he shouldn't interrupt. "We lived in a small house for a while, but then we had to leave. Grandpa lost his job, and little by little, we lost everything. I remember the day we left our house." Her voice wavered slightly. "He told me it didn't matter where we were. He'd always take care of me." She took a deep breath before continuing, her eyes fixed on the rippling surface of her tea. "Life on the streets was hard. Some nights we slept in shelters, others on a bench in a park. My grandpa always did his best to find a bit of food, but sometimes there was none. He told me that even when everything seemed bad, we still had each other." Ethan felt a tightness in his chest. The image of Henry, once so dignified and proud, sleeping on park benches with a little girl was almost unbearable. "He never gave up on me, never left me alone, even when he was weak, when he could barely walk. He still tried to protect me." Emily lifted her eyes, now bright with unshed tears. "But I knew he was getting worse. That's why I was scared that night on the beach. I thought he was leaving me too." A single tear rolled down her cheek, which she quickly wiped away with the back of her hand. "You saved him. I thought nobody cared about us, but you helped." Ethan looked away, unable to face the gratitude in her eyes. A knot formed in his throat. How could he explain that his company, his decisions, had contributed to their suffering? What kind of savior was he when he had helped create the very situation that destroyed them? "Emily," he began, not really knowing what to say. "You should never have gone through that." "Grandpa always said things happen for a reason," she answered, surprising him. Even on the hardest days, he never got bitter. Ethan raised his eyes, confused. "Even knowing that he lost everything because of a big company?" Emily nodded, a small, sad smile on her lips. "He said it's not what happens to you that matters, but how you respond to it. He spoke of me sometimes." The question slipped out before he could stop it. Emily tilted her head, studying him curiously. Sometimes, he told stories of when you worked at the shop, how quickly you learned, how you had a knack for designing boats. Ethan felt something warm and painful expand in his chest. Even after everything, Henry remembered him like that. He never blamed you, you know, Emily continued, her voice now almost a whisper. Even when we found out you were the owner of the company that bought the pier. The revelation struck Ethan like a punch. You knew, Emily nodded. We saw your picture in the newspaper once, talking about the new resort. Grandpa recognized you right away. And he never reached out, never asked for help. Grandpa has his pride, she said simply. Besides, he always said you had a bigger purpose, that someday you'd realize success isn't just about how much money you have. The girl's simple words carried the weight of Henry's wisdom, a lesson Ethan was only now beginning to truly understand. He still believes in you, Emily added, even after everything. Ethan remained silent, absorbing the impact of those words. Henry knew, he had known all along who was responsible for his downfall, and yet he felt no resentment. He still believed in the young man he had once mentored. I don't know if I deserve that faith, he finally admitted. Emily studied him for a long moment, her young but remarkably perceptive eyes. Grandpa says nobody deserves anything in life, neither the good things nor the bad. What matters is what we do with the chances we're given. Ethan smiled, recognizing Henry's philosophy in her words. He taught you well. He's the best man I know, Emily said simply. She placed her cup on the table and stood, stretching. I think I'll go to sleep now. Emily, Ethan called when she was already at the door. Thank you for telling me all that. She smiled, a genuine smile that lit up her tired face. You're welcome. Good night, Ethan. Good night, Emily. Alone again, Ethan remained motionless in the armchair for a long time. Emily's words echoed in his mind, mingling with memories of Henry, the young man he himself had been and the man he had become. Through the window, he could see the ocean in the distance, a dark, constant presence. The same ocean that had witnessed so many changes in his life. The same ocean that somehow had brought him back to Henry at just the right moment. Maybe Emily and Henry were right. Maybe nothing really happened by chance. The question that remained, however, echoed in his mind as he looked at the distant stars. Did he deserve this chance at redemption? And more importantly, would he know how to make the most of it? The morning was bright, the sun lighting up the garden where Henry sat having his coffee. 3 weeks had passed since his discharge from the hospital, and though he was still thinner than usual, his strength was gradually returning. The doctor had recommended daily walks and a nutritious diet, both rigorously followed under Emily's watchful eye. Ethan watched the older man from the kitchen window. Henry had his eyes closed, his face turned toward the sun like a plant seeking light. There was a serenity about him that Ethan envied, an inner peace that seemed unshakable, despite everything he'd been through. Emily's words from the previous night still reverberated in his mind. Henry knew. He'd known all along that Ethan's company was responsible for his ruin. Yet he showed no bitterness. Ethan took a deep breath and headed out to the garden, carrying 2 cups of coffee. He handed one to Henry, who opened his eyes and accepted it with a nod. How are you feeling today? Ethan asked, sitting down in the chair next to him. Better, Henry replied. The air here is good. Clean. For a few minutes, they sat in silence, soaking up the morning warmth. In the distance, birds sang in the trees, and the breeze carried the smell of the ocean. It was the kind of peace money could buy, this secluded property with an ocean view, but which Ethan rarely allowed himself to appreciate. Emily told me, Ethan said finally, looking at his coffee rather than at Henry, that you knew about me, about my company. Henry didn't seem surprised by the mention. He took a sip of coffee before answering. Yes, I knew. I saw your name on the documents when the purchase offer came in. Then your picture appeared in the paper when they announced the new resort. The calmness with which he related this made Ethan feel even worse. Why didn't you reach out to me? I could have helped. I could have done something. Henry turned to face him directly. And what would you have done, Ethan? Offered me money? Charity? That might have eased your conscience, not my situation. At least you wouldn't have gone through all this. Ethan gestured vaguely, words inadequate to describe years of struggle and privation. Maybe, Henry conceded, or maybe I would have refused your help. Pride is a complicated companion in hard times. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. I don't understand how you can be so calm about it. I ruined your life, Henry. My company destroyed everything you built. You think you're that powerful. Henry smiled faintly. That you can destroy someone's life completely. Isn't that what happened? What happened was that I lost my business and my house. It was hard, yes, harder than you can imagine. But my life? Henry looked toward the house, where Emily could be seen through the window setting the breakfast table. My life is right there, and she survived. Ethan followed his gaze, watching the girl who moved efficiently around the kitchen, placing plates and utensils carefully. There was a resilience in her that mirrored her grandfather's. Even so, he insisted, what happened was wrong and I was part of it. I need to fix things. Henry sighed, placing his cup on the small side table. Ethan, you can't go back in time. What's done is done. Then what? I should just accept it. Move on like nothing happened. No. Henry leaned forward, his eyes intense. You should learn from it. Grow. Become the man I always knew you could be. His words hit Ethan like a physical blow. They echoed conversations from so many years ago, when Henry believed in him more than he believed in himself. I've changed, Henry, he said quietly. I'm not that kid you knew. I know, I've seen the man you've become on the news and in business magazines, successful by the world's standards. But the question is, are you satisfied with that success? The question hung between them, awkward and insistent. Ethan had no quick answer. I'm going to do things differently this time, he finally promised. I won't leave. I won't abandon you two again. Henry studied his face for a long moment. I don't want promises, Ethan. I've heard too many of those over the years from well-meaning people who disappeared when things got tough. It's not just a promise, Ethan insisted. It's a commitment. Words are easy, Henry replied, standing slowly from his chair. Actions are what define a man. With that, he walked away, heading toward the house with measured steps, leaving Ethan alone with his thoughts and the weight of a past he couldn't change. The following afternoon, Ethan was driving back from a neighboring town with Emily in the passenger seat. They had gone to buy materials for a school project. Henry and Ethan agreed it was time for Emily to resume her studies, at least from home for now. Do you think Grandpa will like what we bought? Emily asked, looking at the bags filled with books, colorful paper and art supplies. Definitely, Ethan replied, smiling at her, especially the paint kit. He used to say you have a natural talent for it. Emily smiled, the kind of smile that lit up her whole face. In the past few weeks, those smiles had become more frequent, a sign that, despite everything, she was beginning to feel safe again. Ethan, she said after a few minutes of silence, are you really going to help us find a new house? The question was simple but laden with expectation. Ethan had mentioned the possibility, but for Emily, after so many uncertainties, words weren't enough. Yes, he answered firmly. I've been looking at options your grandpa might like. Places near the ocean like he always preferred. And a place where he can work again. He misses fixing boats. Ethan felt a pang in his chest. Of course, Henry missed his craft. It was more than a job. It was his identity, his passion. I'm thinking about that too, he assured her. Maybe we can find a marina that needs someone with his experience. Emily nodded, satisfied. After a few more minutes, she added, Grandpa seems happier when you're around, even if he doesn't show it much. The observation surprised Ethan. You think so? Yes. It's like a part of him that was missing came back. Her words echoed in Ethan's mind for the rest of the day. While he worked in his office, answering emails and joining teleconferences, he couldn't stop thinking about what Emily had said. Henry seemed happier when he was around, the same Henry who could barely meet his eyes when talking about the past. His concentration was broken by a knock on the door. It was his assistant, Jake, who had come personally to bring documents related to the Newport Beach project, the same family marina the company was pressuring to sell. The owners are starting to cave, Jake reported with evident satisfaction. Our lawyers found a loophole in the lease contract that might speed things up. Ethan looked at the folder in his hands, suddenly aware of what it represented. It wasn't just a business deal, a transaction. It was a family's life, their livelihood, their history, just like Henry's had been. "Jake," he said slowly, "I want you to cancel this acquisition." Jake blinked, clearly confused. "Cancel? But we're about to close. The investors have been informed, and plans for the resort are well underway." "Find another location," Ethan interrupted. "One that doesn't involve destroying a family business that's been there for generations." "But Ethan, this is the ideal spot. All the market research confirms." "The decision is made," Ethan's voice was firm, "and from now on, I want a new policy in all our acquisitions. No family business will be forced to sell. If they want to remain, we'll find ways to incorporate them into our projects, not eliminate them." Jake stared at him like he'd suddenly started speaking another language. "That goes against everything we've built over the years," he argued. "Our strategy has always been, our strategy is changing," Ethan stated, standing up. "Coastal Developments needs to be more than just another corporate predator. It can be a force for sustainable development that benefits communities, not just shareholders." He walked around his desk and headed for the door. "Set up a meeting with the board for next week. We'll present this new vision properly." Leaving a still stunned Jake behind, Ethan left the office for the balcony, where he knew he would find Henry. The older man was seated in his usual chair, gazing out at the ocean while whittling a small piece of wood, a hobby he had recently resumed. "May I join you?" Ethan asked. Henry nodded, without looking up from his work. His hands moved with precision, slowly revealing the shape of a small boat in the wood. "I just cancelled a major project," Ethan said after a few minutes of shared silence, "an acquisition that would have displaced a family much like yours." Henry's hands paused briefly, but he didn't look up. "And why did you do that?" "Because I finally understood what you tried to teach me all those years ago," Ethan replied. "That true success isn't measured by how much you acquire, but by how your actions affect others." Henry set the small carving aside and finally looked at Ethan. There was something in his eyes, not exactly approval, but perhaps a glimmer of hope. "One single gesture won't erase a lifetime of decisions," he said. "I know," Ethan agreed. "It's just the beginning. But I have to start somewhere, don't I?" A faint smile touched Henry's face. "Yes, you do." Encouraged, Ethan continued. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about actions, not words, and about what Emily told me, about how you lost everything." Henry waited in silence and expecting him to go on. "The truth is, I don't know if I can fix the damage I caused," Ethan admitted. "I can't give you back the years you lost, or the security Emily should have had, but maybe I can compensate in other ways." "Such as?" Ethan took a deep breath. "I found a property for sale not far from here, a small marina with a repair shop and a house. The business is declining because the owner is retiring and has no one to take over." Henry narrowed his eyes a bit. "And I'd like to buy it, not for me or for Coastal Developments, for you. So you can start over, doing what you've always loved." Henry was silent for a long moment, his eyes on the ocean. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, controlled. "So this is how you see redemption, buying back what you took from me." His words hit Ethan like a physical blow. "That's not what I'm trying to do." "No?" Henry turned to face him. "Then tell me, Ethan, what exactly are you trying to do?" It was a fair question, one Ethan had asked himself repeatedly over the past few weeks. What was he really after? Absolution, forgiveness, or something deeper? "I'm trying to do the right thing," he answered honestly. "Not to ease my conscience, but because it's what you deserve. What Emily deserves. And if I say no, if I refuse your offer, then we'll find another solution," Ethan replied without hesitation. "One that works for you. The important thing is that you can rebuild your life on your own terms, not mine." Henry studied him for a long moment, as though looking for something in his face. Finally, with an almost imperceptible sigh, he said, "Maybe we could go see that marina, just to take a look." It was a small concession, but Ethan accepted it as if it were a precious gift. "Of course, whenever you'd like." Right then, Emily appeared on the balcony carrying a tray of lemonade. "I made it myself," she announced proudly, setting the tray on the table between them. "Looks delicious," Henry smiled at his granddaughter. As the three of them chatted casually about their day, Ethan observed the interaction between grandfather and granddaughter, the look of adoration in Emily's eyes, the gentleness of Henry's calloused hands as he handed her a glass, the silent language of affection and shared understanding. That was when the truth hit him with crystal clarity. What he was really seeking was not just redemption or absolution, it was connection, it was belonging. It was the chance to be part of something larger than his own success, a family, a community, a purpose that went beyond balance sheets and quarterly profits. Twice to Astarte the next day, Ethan took Henry and Emily to visit the marina. It was a modest place, with a wooden dock in need of repairs, a workshop that had the basic equipment but was outdated, and a small but sturdy house overlooking the bay. It wasn't luxurious like Ethan's mansion, but it had character, history, and potential. As Emily explored the property excitedly, running along the dock and checking out the moored boats, Ethan watched Henry. The older man walked slowly around the space, his hands touching tools and equipment as if reacquainting himself, his eyes sizing up the structures and the repairs needed. "What do you think?" Ethan finally asked when they reached the main workshop. Henry didn't answer immediately. Instead, he approached a dusty workbench, running his hand over the worn wooden surface. His eyes had that distant look, as if he were seeing not just the present, but also future possibilities. "It needs work," he finally said. "A lot of work." "Yes," Ethan agreed. "But is it viable?" Henry turned to face him. "Depends on what you mean by viable. Financially, maybe. With time and effort, as a place to start over?" "Yes." They left the workshop and walked to the end of the dock, where Emily was waving enthusiastically, having befriended a local fisherman. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky and water in oranges and pinks. "I'm not offering charity, Henry," Ethan said, breaking the silence. "I'm offering a partnership. You run the place, bring your expertise back. I provide the initial capital for renovations and improvements, 50-50 for both of us." Henry looked at him, surprised. "A partnership?" "Yes, as equals. No hierarchies. No one bossing the other around. Just two men working together to build something meaningful." It was more than a business proposal. It was an offer of reconciliation, an attempt to establish a new kind of relationship based on mutual respect and a shared purpose. Henry glanced over at Emily, who was now pointing at something in the water for the friendly fisherman. His eyes softened as he watched her, so excited and carefree. "She deserves stability," he said quietly. "A place to call home." "Yes," Ethan agreed. "You both do." Henry turned to face him again. "Why are you doing this, Ethan? Really? The truth?" It was a question that deserved complete honesty. Ethan took a deep breath, collecting his thoughts. "Because when I look at everything I've built, buildings, resorts, the fortune, none of it seems to really matter. Not the way it mattered when I worked by your side, building something with my own hands. Not the way it matters when I see the love between you and Emily." He paused, searching for the right words. "I think I lost something important along the way, Henry. Something I'm only just beginning to rediscover. And what's that? Connection, purpose, the sense that my life means something beyond the numbers in a bank account." Henry nodded slowly, as if the answer made sense to him. "And you think you'll find that here in this old marina?" "I don't know," Ethan admitted. "But I know I won't find it by continuing the way I was, carrying out hostile takeovers, destroying family businesses, living alone in my mansion." A long silence followed, filled only by the sound of the waves gently lapping against the dock and Emily's distant laughter. "I'll think about your offer," Henry said at last. "I can't promise more than that." For Ethan, it was enough. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no either. It was an opening, a possibility, a chance. "That's all I'm asking," he replied. On the drive back home, Emily slept in the back seat, exhausted after a day of exploration. Henry stared out the window, lost in thought. Ethan drove in silence, conscious that something fundamental had changed, not just between him and Henry, but within himself. For the first time in years, he felt truly alive, truly present. The decisions ahead wouldn't be easy. Transforming his company, balancing business with purpose, learning to put people before profit. It would all take hard work and constant commitment. But seeing looking in the rearview mirror at a sleeping Emily and at Henry beside him, Ethan knew he had found something far more valuable than all his previous success. The chance for a new beginning. The opportunity to prove, through actions rather than words, that change was possible. That redemption couldn't be bought, but earned, day by day, choice by choice. And maybe, just maybe, in helping Henry and Emily rebuild their lives, he would rebuild his own as well. The 6 months that followed the acquisition of the marina brought changes neither Ethan nor Henry could have predicted. What began as a simple restoration project became something much bigger, not just the rebuilding of a business, but the rebuilding of lives. The marina, now called Second Horizon, had become a small hub of activity in the coastal community. Henry personally oversaw every aspect of the renovation, from replacing the worn boards on the dock to modernizing the repair shop. His skills, dormant but not forgotten during the hard years, re-emerged with renewed vigor. Ethan observed it all with a growing sense of satisfaction that none of his previous corporate projects had ever provided. Splitting his time between Coastal Development's offices and the marina wasn't easy, but for the first time in years, he felt his work had a purpose beyond profit. That morning, Ethan arrived at the marina earlier than usual. The sun had just appeared over the horizon, painting the sky with soft shades of pink and gold. A few fishermen were already prepping their boats for the day, waving familiarly at him as he passed. He was no longer the distant executive who had arrived 6 months earlier. Now he was simply Ethan, Henry's partner, the man who regularly showed up with his sleeves rolled up, ready to work. He found Henry in the workshop, focused on a project that occupied a work table in the center of the space. It was a detailed model of a boat, carved by hand with the same precision that characterized all of the older man's work. "Good morning," Ethan greeted, placing a bag of fresh bread and coffee on the counter. "You're here early." Henry looked up, a small smile on his lips. "I couldn't sleep. I've been thinking about this project." Ethan moved closer to examine the model. It was impressive in its detail, from the tiny planks of the deck to the meticulously shaped sails. "Is it for the Maritime Festival?" he asked, referring to the community event scheduled for the following month. Henry nodded. "Emily is excited about the model building competition. I thought I'd show her some techniques." Mentioning Emily always brought a smile to both their faces. The girl had blossomed in recent months. The insecurity and fear that characterized her when Ethan first met her had given way to a quiet confidence. She attended the local school, where she quickly excelled in art and literature, and spent her afternoons at the marina, splitting her time between studying and learning her grandpa's trade. "She has a natural talent," Ethan commented, "like her grandpa." Henry didn't respond, but the light in his eyes said it all. The pride he felt for his granddaughter was evident. "I brought some proposals for us to review," Ethan continued, taking a folder from his backpack, "about expanding the apprentice program." The apprentice program had been Henry's idea, offering training in boat building and repair to young people in the community, especially those from low-income families. It started modestly, with just 2 teenagers, but it quickly gained traction. "I found 3 more potential sponsors," Ethan explained, opening the folder. "Local businesses interested in supporting the project." Henry reviewed the documents carefully. Though he'd never had formal administrative schooling, his years running his own business had given him a sharp instinct for viable opportunities. "This one looks promising," he said, pointing to a proposal. "Sullivan's Carpentry. I know the owner, an honest man who values good work." Ethan made a note. "I'll schedule a meeting with him next week." As they discussed the program's details, Ethan couldn't help reflecting on how much things had changed. A year ago, he would have been in his corporate penthouse office, analyzing financial reports and planning his next acquisition. The idea of concerning himself with the education of young apprentices in a small coastal community would have seemed absurd. Yet here he was, feeling more alive and fulfilled than ever before in his corporate career. "How's the other project coming along?" Henry asked, breaking Ethan's train of thought. "The Fund for Small Businesses." The Coastal Renewal Fund, as Ethan had named it, was his most ambitious attempt to atone for the past. Created with his own personal capital and supported by investors who shared his new vision, the fund provided financial support and consulting for small business owners impacted by predatory corporate development, including, but not limited to, projects by coastal developments itself. "We approved 5 more applications yesterday," Ethan replied. "A family-owned bakery in Seacrest, a fisherman's market in Harbour Point, a small guest house in Cliff Bay. Places we almost bought out for the Southern Cove Resort," Henry observed, recognizing the names. Ethan nodded. The Southern Cove project had been cancelled 4 months earlier, after a tense board meeting. Some directors resisted the new direction Ethan proposed for the company, but the majority ended up agreeing that a new development model, one that incorporated and strengthened local businesses rather than eliminating them, could be not only ethically superior, but also more sustainable in the long run. "We're redesigning that project entirely," Ethan explained. "Instead of an exclusive resort that would shut out the local community, we're planning a maritime village that includes existing businesses and creates opportunities for new local entrepreneurs." Henry regarded him with the same look Ethan knew well, a mix of scrutiny and reserved pride. "That's a big change for coastal developments." "It's the right change," Ethan replied simply. Before they could continue, the workshop door opened and Emily walked in wearing her school backpack. Her face lit up at the sight of Ethan. "You came!" she exclaimed, running to hug him. "I thought today was one of your office days." Ethan smiled, returning the hug. Even now, Emily's spontaneous displays of affection caught him by surprise, an unexpected gift he'd come to treasure. "I rearranged my schedule," he explained. "Didn't want to miss sailing day." Their boating outing had become a monthly tradition, a day when the 3 of them went out on the sea in the small sailboat they'd restored together. For Emily, it was an adventure. For Henry, a return to his roots. For Ethan, a constant reminder of what truly mattered in life. "I'll get the snacks ready," Emily announced, already running toward the small house on the marina property where she and Henry now lived. When they were alone again, Henry turned back to Ethan. "She looks forward to these days, you know. She marks them on the calendar and crosses off each passing day." The words filled Ethan with a warmth that had nothing to do with the sun. "I look forward to them too," he admitted. Henry nodded, returning to his model. "Let's wrap things up then. The sea awaits." 3 hours later, the sailboat New Beginning glided smoothly over the waters of the bay. Emily stood at the bow, watching dolphins play not too far away. Henry held the helm with the ease of someone born to the sea, while Ethan adjusted the sails, his hands now calloused from the physical labor he'd reintroduced into his life. "I don't think I've ever seen the sky so blue," Emily commented, walking back to sit between the 2 men. Her hair, now longer and healthier, blew in the wind. "That's because you're really looking," Henry said. "Most people look but don't truly see." It was the kind of casual wisdom Henry often shared, small lessons wrapped in simple observations. Ethan had learned to value them as much as Emily did. "How's your school project going?" Ethan asked as he fine-tuned the boat's course. Emily's eyes sparkled. "I finished it yesterday. It's a model of the marina, with all the boats and the dock. I even made tiny figures of the 3 of us." "I can't wait to see it," Ethan smiled. As they sailed farther toward the horizon, their conversation flowed naturally. From the upcoming community festival to their plans for expanding the workshop. It wasn't the first time Ethan noticed how different his communication with Emily and Henry was compared to his corporate interactions. There were no hidden agendas, no power games, just honest sharing of thoughts and feelings. "You know," Henry said after a comfortable silence, "when I was on that abandoned boat, barely conscious, I never imagined I'd be here a year later." It was rare for Henry to directly mention the hard times they'd endured. Ethan looked at him in surprise. "I guess none of us could have predicted where we'd end up," he replied. Henry adjusted the cap he wore to shield himself from the sun, his eyes on the horizon. Life has a strange way of bringing us where we need to be, even if the path is longer and harder than we'd like. Emily, who had been listening intently, chimed in. Like a current you can't see, but it's carrying the boat anyway. Henry smiled at his granddaughter. Exactly like that, little one. Then turning back to Ethan. Some call it destiny, others the natural consequences of our choices. I prefer to think life gives us chances to set things right, if we're willing to recognize them. The words resonated deeply in Ethan. Do you think that's what we're doing, setting things right? Henry considered the question for a moment. I think we're trying, and maybe that's what matters most, the effort, the commitment to something better than what came before. Somehow, that simple conversation on a boat in the vast ocean crystallized everything that had changed in Ethan's life. It wasn't just about repairing past wrongs or making amends to Henry and Emily for their suffering. It was about building something new, a future that honored lessons learned and the connections forged along the way. When they returned to the marina at the end of the afternoon, they found Jake waiting on the dock. Ethan's former assistant, now director of operations for the Coastal Renewal Fund, looked anxious. Sorry to interrupt your day off, he said as soon as the boat was moored, but I thought you'd want to know right away. The proposal for the Larson family was approved. Ethan felt a wave of relief and satisfaction. The Larsons had been one of the fund's toughest cases, a family whose three-generation fish market had been shut down after Coastal Developments built a commercial complex 5 years earlier. They hadn't just lost their business. John Larson, the father, had suffered a stroke soon after, attributed to the stress of the situation. They accepted, Ethan asked. Jake nodded, handing him a folder. They signed this morning. The new location is better than the old one, closer to the fishing port. With the fund's support, they can reopen in about 3 months. Emily, who was helping Henry tie up the boat, asked, Are they the people in that photo, the man with the sad face and the 2 kids? Ethan nodded. He'd shown Emily some of the fund's cases, explaining that part of his job was to help people who'd gone through hardships like she and Henry had. They're going back to selling fish, she asked, coming closer. Yes, Ethan replied, and they'll probably be our competition now since they plan to add a small restaurant. Emily smiled. But it's the good kind of competition, right? The kind that makes you want to be better, not destroy them. Ethan exchanged a look with Henry, both amazed by her insight. Exactly, Emily. It's the good kind of competition. After Jake left, promising to send full details the next day, the 3 walked to Henry and Emily's house. It was a modest yet cozy structure they had renovated together. Though Ethan still kept his apartment in the city, he spent more and more time there, often sleeping in the guest room when work at the marina ran late. While Emily showered, Henry and Ethan sat on the small porch facing the sea. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky with vibrant colors, oranges, purples, and golds reflected in the calm water. I've been thinking, Henry said after a few minutes of shared silence, about your offer. 3 weeks earlier, Ethan had suggested an idea he'd been considering for some time, selling his mansion, which he rarely visited now, and buying a bigger house near the marina where all 3 could live together. The proposal had surprised even Ethan when he spoke it aloud, but once said, he realized how much he wanted it. I don't want to push, Ethan replied cautiously. It was just an idea. Henry shook his head. It's not the pressure that worries me. It's what's best for Emily. And for you, too. How so? Emily adores you, Henry explained. That's obvious. And I know you feel the same about her. But I also know your life is divided now, between this simpler world with us and your corporate world. I wonder if, over time, you'll miss what you left behind. It was a legitimate concern, one Ethan had considered himself. His transformation over the past months had been profound, but not without cost. Some old friends and colleagues didn't understand his new priorities. Certain investors had pulled their support from Coastal Developments when he redirected the company's mission. His lifestyle had simplified considerably. You know what I realized recently, he replied after a pause, that I never felt as whole as I do now, divided between 2 worlds, maybe. But for the first time, I'm living by values that really mean something to me. He looked at Henry, wanting him to understand. I'm not proposing we live together out of obligation or guilt. I'm proposing it because you two are the family I've chosen. The family I never knew I needed until I found you again. Henry studied him for a long moment, his wise eyes searching Ethan's face. Finally, with a slight nod, he said, Emily's going to be overjoyed. She's already asked me 3 times this week when you're really moving into our house. The warmth spreading through Ethan's chest was so intense, it nearly took his breath away. So, it's a yes. It's a yes, Henry confirmed. But on one condition. Which one? That it be a permanent decision, the older man replied. Emily's been abandoned enough in her life. If we're doing this, it has to be with the intention that it's a real home for all of us. The seriousness in Henry's words resonated deeply with Ethan. It wasn't just about sharing a space, it was about creating a lasting commitment, about being the family Emily deserved. So you have my word, he promised, and this time, he knew it was a promise he'd keep for the rest of his life. Summer gave way to fall, and fall gave way to winter. The house Ethan found for the 3 of them wasn't as grand as his old mansion, but it was spacious and welcoming, with an ocean view rivaling any luxury property on the coast. It had enough rooms for each of them to have personal space, a large kitchen where they spent hours cooking together, and a workshop where Henry continued to teach his craft to both Emily and Ethan. The Coastal Renewal Fund had grown beyond initial expectations. What started as Ethan's personal project had become a respected organization, with branches in 3 coastal states and plans to expand inland. More than 50 families had benefited directly, their businesses restored or reinvented with the fund's support. Coastal developments, under Ethan's new vision, had lost some traditional investors but gained others, attracted by its approach to sustainable, community-oriented development. Profits were smaller than before, but more stable, and the company was now recognized not as a corporate predator, but as a model of ethical business in real estate. On a Sunday morning, almost 18 months after the meeting on the beach, Ethan woke to the sound of laughter coming from the kitchen. He found Henry and Emily making pancakes, a weekend tradition they'd established. You're finally up, Henry teased, flipping a perfectly golden pancake. We almost started without you. Don't even think about it, Ethan replied, pouring himself coffee. I promised Emily we'd go to the beach after breakfast, remember? Emily, now nearly 11 and several inches taller, nodded enthusiastically. I'm taking my new sketchbook. I want to capture those rock formations we saw last week. Her artistic talent had flourished over the past year. Her drawings of marine scenes were starting to gain local recognition, and a gallery in town had recently offered a small exhibit of her work. After breakfast, the 3 of them headed to the beach, part of their weekly routine. It was the same beach where Ethan had found Emily on that fateful night, something none of them mentioned aloud, but which they all understood. The day was bright and cool, typical of early spring. Emily ran ahead, her sketchbook tucked under her arm, while Henry and Ethan walked side by side at a more leisurely pace. I got news from the Larsons yesterday, Ethan commented. Their restaurant is thriving. They're thinking of opening a second location next year. Henry smiled. A true success story. One of many, I hope, Ethan replied. Then, after a pause, he added, I've been thinking about expanding the fund to include scholarships for kids in communities affected by corporate development who want to go into business but with a different approach, raising the next generation of ethical entrepreneurs. Henry raised an eyebrow, but sounded approving. Something like that, Ethan agreed. People who understand from the start that success doesn't have to come at someone else's expense. They stopped to watch Emily, who had found a spot on the sand and was already drawing intently, the wind playing with her hair. The transformation in her was as remarkable as the one in Ethan. The frightened, distrustful child had become a confident, compassionate young girl with a bright future. She finally has the childhood she deserves, Henry commented, obvious satisfaction in his voice. Ethan nodded, feeling a warmth in his chest that wasn't from the spring sun, but from the certainty he had found something far more valuable than any fortune. A family. Their purpose. A legacy that went beyond buildings and bank accounts. You know, Henry said after a moment, When I first met you on that dock all those years ago, I saw something in you I think you didn't see in yourself. Potential, not just for the success you eventually achieved, but for something greater, to make a difference. Ethan looked at the man who had once been his mentor, then almost a stranger, and was now somewhere between a father and a friend, a bond that transcended simple labels. It took me a long time to understand what really matters, he admitted. What matters is that you understood, Henry replied simply. Some never get there. They kept walking down the beach, eventually reaching Emily, who proudly showed them her drawing, a perfectly detailed capture of the coastline with the distant lighthouse and seagulls hovering over the waves. It's beautiful, Ethan praised, genuinely impressed by her growing talent. I'm thinking of giving it to Ms. Johnson, Emily explained. She's always talking about how she wishes she could see the ocean more often. Emily's spontaneous generosity was just one of the many things Ethan admired about her. Despite everything she had gone through, or perhaps because of it, she had never lost her capacity to think of others, to share beauty where she found it. After spending several hours on the beach, collecting shells, drawing, and simply enjoying each other's company, they started the walk back home. Emily ran ahead again, chasing a butterfly that crossed her path. You know what I thought today, Henry said, watching her, that maybe everything had to happen exactly the way it did. Every choice, every mistake, every hardship to bring us here. Ethan reflected on that. It was a comforting idea that even at the darkest times, maybe a greater purpose was at work. Not predetermined fate, but a path shaped by choices and consequences, leading eventually to a resolution that couldn't have been predicted, yet in hindsight felt almost inevitable. I think you're right, he agreed, though I wish the journey had been easier for you both. Henry shrugged. The difficulty of the path makes arriving more meaningful. When they caught up with Emily, she had stopped to watch the sunset beginning to transform the sky. The colors, gold, orange, and deep red, reflected on the water, creating a spectacle no painting could ever fully capture. It's like the sky is on fire, she said in awe. It's the end of one day, Henry commented, and the promise of another tomorrow. Ethan placed his hands on Emily and Henry's shoulders, feeling a completeness he had never known before. For the first time in years, perhaps for the first time in his adult life, he felt genuine peace. Here, on this beach where it had all begun, with these two people who had become the center of his world, Ethan Morrison finally understood the most important lesson. True wealth wasn't in what he amassed, but in who he chose to become. That new beginnings were possible, even when the path seemed hopelessly lost. That human connections, family, whether by blood or by choice, were the only legacy that truly mattered. Let's go home, Emily finally said, as the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Home, a simple word carrying so much meaning. It wasn't just the physical building they shared, but the sense of belonging they had created together. They walked side by side along the beach, leaving footprints in the sand that the tide would soon wash away. But the path they had built together, that would remain a silent testament to how, even in the most improbable circumstances, life offered second chances to those willing to take them. In the house lit up in the distance, a night of shared stories, discussed dreams, and the comfort of knowing that no matter what the future held, they had each other awaited them. So a family united not by blood, but by something equally powerful: choice, commitment, love. And for Ethan, who once measured success in transactions and acquisitions, this was the most significant achievement of his life. Not the empire he had built, but the home he had found. Not the walls of his old mansion, but the hearts now inhabiting his own. As they climbed the porch steps, Ethan took one last look at the distant ocean, that constant force that had shaped their lives in so many ways. The same ocean that had nearly taken Henry, that had served as a precarious refuge in desperate times, now stood for something else entirely: horizon, possibility, future. Emily held their hands, one on each side, as they went inside together. A simple gesture that said everything that needed to be said. They were home,